debate began as most televised panels do, measured, polite, and rehearsed. But as Representative Jasmine Crockett and House Speaker Mike Johnson took their seats on live television, few anticipated the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The topic: voting rights and systemic inequality. Mike Johnson started with a textbook Republican argument, citing election integrity and states' rights as pillars of his position. Jasmine listened silently, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When it was her turn to speak, the atmosphere shifted. "Respectfully, Mr. Speaker," she began, "you're peddling a myth wrapped in legalese." Johnson chuckled slightly, attempting to disarm her, but Crockett was just warming up. "The very laws you defend disproportionately disenfranchise black and brown voters," she continued. "You know it. The courts know it, and the public is catching on." The host tried to maintain neutrality, but the heat in Jasmine's voice grabbed everyone's attention. The crowd stirred. Johnson adjusted his tie. Mike Johnson responded with a composed but condescending tone. "That's a common misconception," he said. "These laws apply equally to all citizens." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Equal application doesn't mean equal impact," she fired back. "Requiring IDs in communities where DMV access is scarce doesn't level the playing field, it tilts it further." The host leaned forward, sensing the segment turning combustible. Johnson replied, "We're trying to restore trust in our elections." Crockett, eyes locked on his, replied coldly, "You're restoring distrust and labeling it democracy." The crowd reacted audibly. Johnson smiled nervously, clearly not expecting such a direct takedown. "We've passed legislation that was voted on democratically," he insisted. Jasmine countered instantly. "Democracy isn't just the process, it's about ensuring participation isn't suppressed by design." Her words hit like thunder. Johnson sat back slightly, as if absorbing a blow. The energy in the room shifted, palpably. Even the host seemed stunned. Johnson attempted a pivot, shifting to the Constitution. "The Founding Fathers built a system based on individual responsibility," he stated. Jasmine's eyebrow rose. "The Founding Fathers also built it on the backs of enslaved people," she retorted. "Let's not cherry-pick history when the full story is inconvenient." Gasps rippled across the studio. Johnson appeared momentarily flustered. "We can't change the past," he said, "but we can uphold the framework they built." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "A flawed framework demands renovation, not blind reverence." The audience erupted in applause. Johnson looked away, momentarily speechless. "I'm not here to debate feelings," he mumbled. Jasmine clapped back, "Good, because facts aren't feelings, and the facts say your policies hurt real people." The host, eyes wide, tried to maintain order, but the dynamic had shifted completely. Crockett was in command. Johnson's composure faltered. For the first time, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. Trying to recover, Johnson brought up voter fraud, referencing debunked claims and cherry-picked statistics. Jasmine wasn't having it. "Stop spreading ghost stories," she said, her voice rising just enough to underscore her conviction. "Every credible investigation, every court, including Trump-appointed judges, found no evidence of widespread fraud," Johnson protested. "There were anomalies," but Crockett cut in. "Anomalies don't justify voter suppression. Don't bulldoze a neighborhood because one house has termites." The host's jaw visibly dropped at the metaphor. Johnson paused, searching for a rebuttal, but none came. Jasmine leaned in. "Let's talk about who's really committing fraud. Those passing bills to make voting harder, not easier. That's manipulation masquerading as governance." The studio audience broke into spontaneous applause. Johnson's face tensed. His mouth opened, then closed again. He reached for his water glass, trying to reset. But the damage had been done. His argument was not only dismantled, it had been incinerated. The host, clearly trying to balance the segment, asked Crockett if there was room for compromise. "Always," she said. "But compromise requires honesty. And too often what we get is gaslighting." Johnson, his tone sharpening, responded, "This kind of rhetoric makes bipartisanship impossible," as Jasmine turned to him. "What makes bipartisanship impossible is the refusal to acknowledge harm. When you deny disenfranchisement, You don't want unity, you want obedience." The statement hung heavy in the room. Johnson glanced off camera, visibly unsettled. "I believe in the rule of law," he said weakly. Jasmine's reply was swift. "Then stop supporting laws designed to marginalize. Belief in the law doesn't absolve complicity and injustice." The crowd murmured again. Johnson's face was flushed now, his earlier calm replaced with evident frustration. "You're twisting intentions," he argued. Jasmine leaned back, slightly confident. "Tensions don't matter if the result is oppression." That single sentence summed up the entire segment's power shift. Jasmine then laid out a list of specific examples: Georgia's voting law, Florida's polling restrictions, Texas's voter purges, all aimed at limiting access under the guise of election integrity. Johnson tried to deflect. Those laws were passed through elected legislatures. Jasmine hit back. "So were Jim Crow laws. Legality doesn't equal morality." The studio went silent. Johnson didn't respond. He simply blinked, his expression stunned. The host looked toward the producers, unsure whether to continue or cut the feed. But Crockett wasn't done. "We're tired of being polite while rights are stripped," she said. "We're done pretending that racism doesn't wear suits and pass bills." The host visibly exhaled, realizing the moment was too big to interrupt. Johnson sat rigid, clutching his pen but not writing. Crockett continued, "You say you respect the Constitution. I say you exploit it when it's convenient." The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Mike Johnson, finally, spoke, his voice quieter. "You're painting everyone who disagrees as a villain." Jasmine shook her head. "No, I'm calling out actions that harm people. That feels like an attack. Maybe examine the actions, not the messenger." Johnson looked down clearly, rattled. "That's not fair," he muttered. "Fair?" Jasmine asked. "Was it fair when voters waited 10 hours in line because polling places were slashed? Was it fair when mail-in ballots were invalidated over signature discrepancies? You're not upset about fairness. You're upset about accountability." The host cleared her throat. "Let's take a final comment from each of you." Johnson hesitated, then mumbled a rehearsed line about unity and moving forward. Jasmine looked directly into the camera. "Democracy doesn't survive on slogans. It survives on access, inclusion, and truth. And we're done being quiet." The screen froze on her determined face as the credits began to roll. Johnson sat beside her, stone-faced. Within minutes, clips of the exchange exploded online. Hashtags like Crockett Clash and Mike Frozen began trending. Political analysts scrambled to frame the moment, but viewers already knew what they had seen. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won the argument, she had dominated the entire segment with poise, facts, and unshakable confidence. Johnson's usual talking points had fallen flat under her piercing scrutiny. Editorials popped up the next morning, praising her performance. Even traditionally conservative outlets admitted she had landed devastating blows. Meanwhile, Johnson's team released a soft-toned statement about respectful disagreement, but the damage had been done. For many, the visual of his stunned expression said more than any press release could. Jasmine Crockett became a household name overnight, with late-night hosts, social media influencers, and political commentators hailing her as a rising star with a lethal intellect. Johnson, by contrast, became the face of a defeated narrative. The fallout extended beyond television. Voters who had been apathetic started sharing clips, voicing support for voting reform, and donating to advocacy groups.
Jasmine Crockett's
Campaign donations reportedly surged within hours. Town halls in various states referenced her arguments, and student groups at universities played the clip as part of political discussion panels. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was a rallying cry. Mike Johnson, meanwhile, retreated into prepared interviews and carefully controlled appearances. Gone were the confident back and forths. He avoided unscripted debates. The image of him sitting silent, face drained, while Jasmine spoke truth to power, lingered in the public imagination. Political strategists took note. They understood now that Crockett wasn't just a passionate voice, she was a formidable force in American politics. Her performance had set a new standard for live debate that made one thing clear: when armed with truth and clarity, One voice can shift the room and the narrative. In the weeks that followed, pundits continued to unpack the segment, some calling it a turning point in political discourse. Jasmine Crockett remained grounded, focusing on legislation and activism, but the recognition grew. "I didn't set out to embarrass anyone," she later said in an interview. "I just refused to let misinformation go unchallenged." And that was exactly what made her performance so impactful. It was impersonal. It was principled. Mike Johnson, for all his stature and title, had been dismantled, not by theatrics, but by truth. And the truth, when delivered with Jasmine's precision, is hard to argue with. The live debate may have ended, but the echoes of that moment still ripple through political spaces. The look on Johnson's face became symbolic of an entire ideology being held